Hello everyone and welcome to Africa's Craziest, where we bring to you the good, the bad, and the outrageous insights about Africa. In today's video, we are taking a look at the 10 most deadliest and unforgettable wars in Africa. Before we get started, kindly click on the subscription button and notification bell to be notified each time we put up a new video. Also remember to like, comment, and share if you find the video interesting. Many countries across the global south, particularly those in Africa, are currently in the throes of fiscal crises. The Third World must reimagine a path out of our current crisis that doesn't depend on the IMF, its allied institutions, and Western capital. The last 70 years or so have demonstrated that a reliance on these institutions only serves to trap the Third World in a perpetual state of underdevelopment. Several conflicts have rocked various African countries over the years, leading to the death, injury, and displacement of millions. There are current cases of political instability across the continent, with violence and unrest raging in many African countries. The list that follows is limited by the sheer number and kinds of wars and conflicts that have been fought on the continent. There was no criterion for choosing one and leaving out another. The 10 civil wars listed below are merely informational, targeted at those always saying, "We were never taught about the Civil War in school," or a close variation of "We don't talk about the Civil War in my country." The Sudan Civil Wars. Modern Sudan was birthed on the 1st of January 1956. Prior to that, the occupying forces, Britain and Egypt, merged northern Sudan and southern Sudan in 1946. The South wasn't a party to the discussions. Both regions were very different in culture and religion, and were previously governed separately. Yet in 1953 Britain and Egypt agreed to grant the monolithic Sudan independence. By August 1955, 4 months before the ceremonial independence of 1956, civil war between soldiers from the south seeking regional autonomy and the central government in Khartoum began. The war lasted for more than 16 years. There would be an even longer second civil war, a record 22 years, between Sudan People's Liberation Army and Khartoum government, from 1983 to 2005. 6 years later and a referendum, a new country South Sudan was born. The Nigerian Civil War. After Nigeria gained its independence from Britain in 1960, the country was divided into ethnically defined regions. The Igbo people occupied the southeast, the Yoruba the southwest, and the Hausa and Fulani the north. Tensions grew as the nation's military took power following the achievement of Nigerian independence, and fighting broke out among the regions, resulting in as many as 30,000 Igbo deaths at the hands of the Yoruba. On May 30, 1967, Colonel Emeka Ojukwu ceded the Igbo territory, declaring it to be the Republic of Biafra. With the help of Great Britain, the Nigerian federal government reacted quickly, gaining control of the oil-rich southeast coast and blockading supplies to the region, causing severe famine and leading to the deaths of nearly 2 million civilians and 100,000 military personnel. On January 15, 1970, Ojukwu handed over control of the Biafran government to Major General Philip Effiong of the Biafran Army and fled the country with his family. Effiong subsequently surrendered to Nigerian military head of state, General Yakubu Gowon, abruptly ending the 30-month civil war. The Nigerian Civil War was a nationalistic struggle to reunify and reintegrate Nigeria. However, it resulted in different ethnic factions fighting one another, creating chaos and leading to a massive crisis, including the deaths of countless civilians as well as the political redrawing of West Africa. Additionally, because the conflict was a civil war, stabilizing forces within the government had to figure out how to fight and also limit destruction, how to inflict wounds and simultaneously heal relations, and how to subdue forces without causing permanent injury. When the conflict ended, the Nigerian government declared to the Igbo that there was no victor, no vanquished, but historians say the war did and still does affect national politics and policymaking in the region. For example, Ojukwu, in a 2000 interview with BBC News, said he believes the Igbos have been largely excluded from holding power since the Civil War. The Uganda Civil War. In 1894, the area, which is now Uganda, became a British protectorate. Shortly after, the British signed an agreement with Uganda, making it a constitutional monarchy. Uganda Kingdom dates back to the 14th century. It is the largest kingdom in Uganda and constitutes about 16% of the population. In 1967, the monarchy was abolished. What ensued afterwards was a mesh of coups, of intra- and inter-country wars, and plain horror from 1971 to 1986. The Lord's Resistance Army insurgents led by the infamous Joseph Kony, the Lord's Resistance Army, LRA, is responsible for the longest-running rebel upheaval in Uganda and its neighboring countries, resulting in the displacement of nearly 2 million people and the deaths of thousands. The LRA originated in 1987 with the rebellion against Yoweri Museveni's leadership in Uganda, when Kony dubbed himself a spiritual leader and the liberator of the Ekoli people of northern Uganda. Since then, Kony and his regime have become notorious for abducting and forcibly recruiting children, and the LRA has kidnapped more than 60,000 civilians and forced them to serve as soldiers and sex slaves. The Ugandan government has tried several times to hold peace talks with the LRA, but it has thus far been unsuccessful in both opening dialogue and taking military action against the group. The battle to end the LRA's terror has been ongoing for 2 decades. Fighting the LRA is difficult because there are many child soldiers in their ranks, as well as many vulnerable women. While military operations to defeat the LRA have faltered and led to tragic civilian and child soldier deaths, there are several instances where negotiations and dialogues have yielded success, suggesting the potential to end hostilities through peace talks. Unfortunately, in April 2017, the U.S. and the Ugandan government announced each would officially end its hunt for Kony, and the LRA continues to abduct and terrorize people in the region. The Somali Civil War. In 1991, a coup ousted dictator Mohammed Siad Barre, president of the Somali Democratic Republic. This shift in the balance of power sparked a 20-plus-year civil war that killed as many as 1 million Somalis via violence, famine, or disease. Following Barre's removal from power, the Somali Democratic Republic divided into 2 opposing parties, the Somali National Movement in the north and the United Somali Congress of the south. This separation made it difficult to achieve control of the conflicting factions because no one ruling entity was recognized by all Somalis. Those living in the north would not recognize authority from the southern faction, and those in the south opposed leadership from the Somalis in the north. The lack of a central government forced the U.S. to close its embassy that same year. The United Nations and the United States became heavily involved in the conflict from 1992 to 1995, sending military forces and humanitarian aid to the country. The United States officially ended its involvement in Somalia in 1994 due to the lack of a foreseeable resolution and financial costs in excess of $1.7 billion. The Somali Civil War's large death toll and protracted conflict could possibly have been avoided with earlier humanitarian action, according to a 1999 report commissioned by the late and former United Nations Secretary-General Kofi Annan. However, the heavy fighting between the warlords obstructed timely U.S. relief efforts in Somalia. Rwandan Civil War. Rwanda gained independence from Belgium on July 1, 1962. Prior to that, a referendum was held to determine if the monarchical system of government which had existed since the 18th century should be retained. The results were overwhelmingly against keeping the Tutsi monarchy in an independent Rwanda. In 1959, the so-called Rwanda Revolution happened, which led to the majority Hutu taking charge of the newly formed republic. The violence from the revolution made thousands of Rwandans refugees, most of them Tutsis. On October 1, 1990, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, RPF, mostly Tutsi refugees who had fled to Uganda, launched an attack on Rwanda and began a war which ended temporarily in 1993, because of efforts of the Organization of African Union, OAU, now AU. But in 1994, when a rocket shot down the plane carrying presidents of Burundi and Rwanda, killing them both, the war started afresh and led to the Tutsi genocide. Between April and July of 1994, the Hutus that comprised roughly 15% of the Rwandan population murdered Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana. This jump-started the systematic and brutal genocide of approximately 800,000 Tutsis, the ethnic minority of Rwanda's population. The 100-day genocide was relentless, pitting neighbor against neighbor and in some instances, even forcing Hutu husbands to kill their Tutsi wives. Rwanda identification cards named a person's ethnic classification, which made it impossible for Tutsis to escape persecution and slaughter. As a result of the conflict, the United Nations established a military presence in Rwanda but did not have the authorization to take action. Meanwhile, the United States government refused to get involved due to fears of another failed peace initiative similar to their previous undertaking in Somalia. The massacre ended on July 4, 1994, when the Rwandan Patriotic Front, RFP, which had the support of the Ugandan army, invaded the capital city of Kigali and defeated the Hutus. Much like the Holocaust, the Rwandan genocide was caused by state-sanctioned hatred and dehumanization of the ethnic minority Tutsis. In 2008, the Canadian Supreme Court recognized that the classification of Tutsis as other created a climate of indifference in Rwanda which ultimately allowed the genocide to occur. Since the genocide, Rwanda has grappled with the status of former government forces and refugees in neighboring countries, how to best pursue justice for genocidal crimes, and how to reconstruct the political, social, and economic infrastructure of a country that was devastated by intense internal conflict. The Eritrean-Ethiopian War. The two-year war between the neighboring countries of Eritrea and Ethiopia was triggered over a border dispute and claimed approximately 80,000 lives. The war began on May 6, 1998, when military and police from both countries exchanged fire in a rural area near the disputed border, and ended in 2000, between the months of May and June, after the two countries were able to negotiate a ceasefire agreement, called the Algiers Peace Treaty. The Eritrean-Ethiopian War was classified as a border war, and the parties who negotiated the treaty took a purely legal stance at resolving the conflict, which left both sides unsatisfied and failed to ease tensions between the countries. Neither side wants a full-fledged war, Ethiopia because a war could reverse the country's economic gains, and Eritrea, because its government knows it's in a weaker political and diplomatic position. The result is a lack of dialogue and a climate of fear between the neighboring countries, which has led to economic tension, political unrest, and a decrease of overall growth within the area. Democratic Republic of Congo. The scene for one of the worst ever civil wars in African history, the Democratic Republic of Congo has moved from the national conflict of the late 1990s to a series of smaller, localized conflicts focused in specific regions and centered on land, resources, and power. The impact of King Leopold II of Belgium's bloody colonization of the country is still felt in this ongoing series of violent conflicts. While conflict has become more localized, that does not lessen its damage. Sporadic waves of fighting across many parts of the country make the DRC a complex and challenging humanitarian situation. Over 5 million Congolese people are internally displaced within the country, representing the third largest population of internally displaced people, IDPs, in the world. The latest ONUCHA estimates place the number of Congolese requiring humanitarian assistance at over 26.4 million, a 20% increase compared to last year. Burkina Faso and the Sahel. A decade of armed conflict in the Western Sahel region of Africa has resulted in a deteriorating humanitarian situation across Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Crisis knows no borders, and what began as violence in Mali in January of 2012 has now resulted in attacks across the region, which surged in 2021. That year alone, ONUCHA estimates that 500,000 people were displaced. Currently, ONUCHA estimates 4.7 million people require humanitarian aid, a 34% increase compared to last year. UNICEF estimates 3.2 million children require assistance, a 23% increase compared to last year. Despite going on for over a decade, the violence has escalated in the last year due to broken ceasefires and renewed hostilities. The Liberian Civil Wars. When the 1980 coup happened, Liberia had been a republic for over 100 years. The coup unsettled the previously peaceful country and created the environment for the civil war, which started in 1989 and ended in 2003. Mozambique Civil War. Unlike most African countries, Mozambique gained independence in 1975 through an armed conflict with Portugal. The war started on September 25, 1964 and ended September 8, 1974. 2 years after the War for Independence, civil war between the ruling government and Mozambique resistance movement, RENAMO, started. Though that war ended in 1992, since 2013 there has been a resurgence of RENAMO militancy. By examining the conflicts of Africa's past, military historians can gain an understanding of how these conflicts negatively impacted economic and political development throughout many African nations. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and why not share it with your network. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video on some of the craziest things about Africa.